I have chosen to develop using ASP.NET's C# framework because of its core services it provides, which include HTTP requests, processing input validation, security and state management. The view shows the application to the user and how the user requests change in the model. An element which can be included within the view are HTML helpers. They are optional within the framework, but using them reduces both the amount of HTML and script needed. HTML helpers make it easy to add content. For example, standard HTML elements like text boxes and links are typically a method that generates a string. HTML helpers allow code to be reused on different pages and reduce the risk of typos within the HTML. An example of the HTML helper is a trunnicate. It allows you to restrict the length of the data displayed to the user. In this example, I have restricted the description of the news article to 45 characters. This displays enough information for the user to decide if they want to read further. The HTML helper is defined at the top of the page and then referenced within the same page. They also can be used to generate a HTML form. For example, the news manager's edit, you can see it here. The text box is the validation and the label. Whereas the view pages start with the @ symbol and have a closed within the brackets. The brackets allow for multi-line code blocks. This makes it easier to manage the layout and the content. The automatic mapping action method parameters are used by the controller to display information about a particular piece of information. I've used this to display information about the details of a particular news article based on its ID number. This allows both the news admin users and the visitors of the site to view the full news article. The controller responds to events from the user and the system. For example, it responds to incoming request and user interaction, executes appropriate application logic, saves data from the view and sends the response back to the view page. This initiates change in the model and/or view. Each controller is part of the specialization of the built-in controller class, therefore all controllers need to be within the controller folder. Data validation checks for user error. It does this by checking the input against the domain model. It checks for the user error, missing fields, out of range strings, ambiguous or unexpected string literals. View models represent data which you want to be displayed on a view page. The information which is contained within the view model is connected to both the model and the view pages. An example of this is the article model. I have added data annotations to the article model so it will display validation messages when required information is missing. For example, required indicates that the element is needed. Examples of this include the title, content and date. The error message will within the speech marks is what will be displayed to the user. The display name on the article URL is another way of displaying the validation message. The string length is reduced from the max allowed on the title but left on the article content, allowing long articles to be added. I use the built-in domain model validation attribute, the compare feature on the password and confirm password input to allow the inputs to be checked to see if they were the same value. HTML tags are added to the edit form. This shows once saved that the HTML tags are displayed as in style, not as in text. ASP has authentication and authorization features built in. Authorization is knowing the identity of the user who is trying to log in. Authorization is deciding whether a user is allowed to perform an action. For example, a normal user would not have access to the News Manager pages. The authorized attribute is used to limit the page, so only logged in members can access the News Manager pages. This stops users from guessing the admin controller routes and gaining access. Routing can be used to limit certain pages to logged in members only. Authorization rules can be applied to only the root URL of both the URL and the physical URL that it maps to. The root table is created in the global AX. It contains event handlers. The lifestyle events are created during the application start events. The pattern is typically controller, category, then subcategory. The routes are mapped to a handler. It can be physical, like an ASPX file, but it can also be to a class that processes the request, like a controller. As you can see, the index page has a a paging feature at the bottom, allowing the user to swap after the initial 4 articles are displayed. It also allows the user to search for an article by the title name. The articles are displayed in date order and the results can be cleared.